You gotta love that. I turn on my video and keep myself muted. Hello, Joy Fuelers. It's Becky here with the Joyfuel Kindcast, and I am super excited for this delicious conversation that we're about to have. Joyfuel Kindcast has been a podcast for the last several years, as many times an audio podcast, and we're experimenting with new ways of bringing our guests to you. And today is just going to be a total joy because we're doing this live with Priya Mahtani in England. And Priya is a writer, a social entrepreneur, and founder of the School of Sophia. And she lives in the UK, my motherland, with her two teenagers with a passion for Waldorf education. She is building community and collaborating with others to shift the learning paradigm into one that places the needs of the growing child first, as together we raise happy, healthy, confident young people full of hope and hope for the future. And I'm super excited to have Priya here, and Priya can turn on your video and unmute yourself, darling, and it will be so lovely to see you. Yay!
Yay.
Yes, the goddess. Ah.
So lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited. And the things that you talk about and hold so dear, I do as well. And just the Joyfuel Kindcast, we love to talk about kindness, creativity, and joy. And I see you as a creativity activist among the many other activisms that you have. So I'm really excited to learn more about you. Now, where exactly are you in England?
So I am in a little village called King's Langley, which most people might know because it's famous in Game of Thrones, King's Landing. They actually filmed here, and it's in Hertfordshire, which is a county about 30 miles outside of London.
All right. So I'm originally from Gloucestershire, from the forest.
Oh, lovely. Beautiful.
And I should project that the longer I talk with you, the stronger my English accent will become.
Right.
It's when living here in America, I have a very Americish accent. It's the rhythm is very American, and then the pronunciation is British, and it throws everybody off as to exactly where I'm from. But I'm from the earth. But it's so lovely. I'm so grateful to have this time together. And we actually met in June, thanks to the internets, the webs that connect us through Facebook, through a little thing called World Unity Week that brought us together. Extraordinary. And I know you were doing really amazing presentations and things during that. And as these months have blossomed on, I know your work has continued to grow, and would love you to tell us a little bit about what it is you do and what you're passionate about right now.
Sure. Well, yeah, World Unity Week. I mean, that was just epic, off the charts. And I mean, I just don't even know how you managed to organize such a huge extravaganza of incredible people and presentations from all over the globe. I mean, that really was a creativity fest in so many different ways. Yeah, and as you shared, I was sharing a presentation and I was a steward in a room, so I was also supporting another group. And yeah, I think one of the things that I really remember from that time was just the profound capacity to really deeply connect with people, even in these Zoom spaces. Of course, I know that, you know, real face-to-face hugging, tactile connections with others is always going to be kind of at the top of the list of connection. But I think, you know, it's so profound to be able to connect so deeply with others, even in this Zoom space. So I really, which sort of brings me to one of the things I'm passionate about, because connection is really at the heart of everything that lights me up. And so I was just totally overjoyed to be connected with you and everybody on the team at World Unity Week. And it's facilitated deepening connections over that time. And, you know, now we're having this conversation, and I'm particularly excited about it because we're having an online education event in November, and that's really kind of a little bit more of the same, just trying to create spaces for parents and educators to connect more deeply with each other and to access their own creativity and experience, you know, what it means to be a creative human being and how that can express itself in community with others.
What does creativity mean to you, and was there a time that you were disconnected from your creativity, consciously? And I'd love to know a little bit more about your journey and how your passion came to be for it.
Well, it's funny because I was thinking about this the other day, and when I was in school, and I think I was probably about 11 years of age, I remember my parents had gone to a parents' evening with my form tutor, where they, the usual thing where they discuss you and how you're doing, your progress in your different subjects. And they came home, and I don't remember much else of what they did say, but I just remember looking at their faces and feeling this kind of sense of disappointment, and just 3 words that they said that stuck in my ears. And it was something that my form tutor had shared, and she said, "Priya lacks imagination." And it was just, I mean, I'm sure that the teacher probably said lots of nice things as well. Who knows?
How old were you? How old?
11.
Oh.
And for me, I don't know, but it hooked into my own insecurities about who I was as a young 11-year-old girl. And for some reason, I took those words very deeply into my soul. And it took me probably the next 10 years to unravel that they were even living there in the first place, because I think, I took the information in and didn't know it was there. And it was only through kind of lots of personal healing and therapy that it came up, that it was really clear that I was living with this belief that I was completely lacking in imagination and creativity. And it was just like an alien kind of phenomena for me. But what I've realized over the, remaining decades of my life is that we're all creative beings. And I've met so many people who say, particularly artists over the years, who say, "Oh, everybody can paint." And I'm like, well, you haven't seen me paint. So you wouldn't say that if you saw how I paint. But I realized that, creativity is not so much about necessarily needing to paint or draw in a particular way, but it's more part of who we are on the inside. We're all creative. And so, I mean, even now, even if somebody was to say to me, "Can you draw a person or a plant pot or something," I could notice part of me would freeze and have this like slight anxiety, because I just don't have the capacity to draw in that very literal way. So but I know that that's something that happens to me as a person, and so I can be kind of more conscious around it. But I think that accessing our creativity is actually a way of connecting to our soul, and it's a way of experiencing the truth, beauty, and goodness that lives in each human soul. And so over the last years, I've kind of gone on lots of different journeys. Some involved therapy and some involved healing modalities. And one thing that really kind of was profound was when I did a Steiner Waldorf teacher training course. I didn't then become a teacher, but what I discovered in the Steiner teacher training course, and that was a year full-time in a school, so you're kind of surrounded by children, is that we got to kind of work with clay, we got to paint, we got to forge metal. There were just so many different ways of exploring and accessing creativity. And it was as if, it was like kind of having an awakening. And I realized that creativity wasn't just the kind of the actual act of, the thing you were creating. It was as much the process and this quality of kind of curiosity that one brings into the creative process just by engaging with a material and working in it in a certain way. And that really radically shifted my whole relationship to what creativity meant and, what it means to be a creative being. And so, so since then, I've kind of had this great love of expressing and exploring creativity and understanding what it means also for me, which is going to be different, at different times in my life. I mean, I remember when my, I think it was in fact the day before my father died a couple of years ago, I had taken my daughter to a pottery class because I was homeschooling her because the local schools in our area were all closed to admissions because they were too full. So I had to homeschool her for 6 months. So part of that process was finding some kind of activities for her to kind of engage with. And one thing I thought might be fun was a pottery class. Now, of course, I'd gone to this pottery class, but you know, this was in the 2 weeks my father was in hospital. It was a very intense time. Emotions were very high. There were lots of kind of intense, difficult emotional moments within my family as well. And I arrived in the kind of studio, absolutely just like, you know, tears in my eyes, just completely not able to really think or breathe or anything. And I was sitting with so much grief, I could barely, you know, keep myself together. And I just kind of, you know, sat there with a lump of clay. And rather than think, oh, I can't do this, or I don't know what I'm going to do, or all the kind of little critical thoughts that sometimes arise when engaging in a creative process, I was so in my feeling space that I just allowed myself to be present with the clay. And I just kind of spent the next hour and a half, 2 hours just working with the clay, and my daughter sitting there kind of silently. And whilst I was working with the clay, I was actually praying, because I was just in such a kind of intense emotional state. And I was kind of praying to Divine Mother for support and guidance and clarity, and to just like hold my heart, which was literally breaking open. And it was just the most, it was just the most extraordinary thing, because what I then created, I mean, I actually have it here, I can show you if you like.
Oh, I'd love to see it.
I have to say, before I share this with you, it's one of my most precious possessions. And even though everybody else in the class was making kind of coasters and flower pot vases and you know, little ornaments for the garden, I found myself, and I didn't even know how it happened exactly, making these kind of goddess statues. So this is kind of what I don't know if you can see clearly, but this is what I created. And there was just something about like the form of her as she emerged, and just the whole feeling experience I had whilst creating her. And I mean, it was just so profound. And really, you know, I mean, I've had lots of different experiences of connecting with my own creativity over the years, but that was just one of those really profound moments where I could see that, you know, by engaging in a creative process, it allowed something to work itself out through me, and it allowed me to come into kind of more harmony and balance and understanding in myself. And I left that pottery session in a completely different space than when I had arrived. So it was almost that the creative process had allowed me to work through, you know, what was living on the inside without me even, you know, I didn't know. It wasn't why I hadn't consciously gone into that process in that way. But it just, again, showed me, you know, that the power of, you know, working in a creative way.
So many things come to my heart mind in what you're sharing, and specifically the fact that you detached from your criticism of what you were creating, that you were in that prayer space for your father and for the situation, and that whole situation allowed you to step into that ability in yourself. And that's something that so many of us get because of our culture and because of the conditioning and because of teachers that we've had, where we get consumed with this notion that we have to create something that has meaning or value to somebody other than ourselves. And that it's okay just to create for creation's sake, you know, that you don't even have to like it, you know, just to have that come through you. So it's really beautiful. And thank you for showing her to us. Really stunning. Did you paint her after you formed?
Oh yeah, I glazed her afterwards. And again, you know, I mean, that's kind of part of that creative process, because I painted her and then I put some glaze on her. I don't know, it's like a kind of bluish.
Was she much lighter then when you painted her, and then when she was
totally different? And then she was high fired at a very high temperature in the kiln. And of course, you just don't know what's going to happen then. And I think that that's kind of one of the great joys of the creative process, is that there is this element of surprise and, you know, not knowing, and that we bring, you know, like in that particular moment, I was bringing my inner landscape into something external, and, you know, sitting with a lot of feelings. But I think that, you know, particularly, you know, in that moment, there was this kind of taking a risk of, you know, you're creating something new, you don't know how it's going to be, or what it's going to even mean, or if it's even going to work. I mean, I have created other goddesses that have exploded in the kiln for various reasons. So of course they're not meant to come into reality. Apparently you need to put, bubbles. Who knew this? Not me, apparently. You learn from often, but then that's also part of the creative process. Things go wrong, things don't always work out, they move in different directions. And I think that, just creativity as a kind of core way of being is just so fundamental to who we are. And, it doesn't have to be pottery per se. It could be singing or dancing or painting or going for a walk or organizing an event. That's another way that I kind of get very excited about expressing my own creativity.
Yeah. You brought up Rudolf Steiner and Waldorf, and it's extraordinary because when I was in the journey of coming back into my own creativity and trying to let myself go and experience and flow in places that I never had, and then in that space encouraging others to do that in creativity play shops, I encountered the Waldorf movement. Of course, being a mum too, realizing this amazing movement in school that is happening, that is Waldorf, and the essence of the senses being engaged in education, and that learning just happens naturally. It's not like the structure. So I'm really curious about how the intersection of Steiner's teachings, Waldorf, and creativity, what that looks like to you as a mother, having two teenagers now. If you could talk a little bit about with motherhood, and I want to talk about the event too, but I just love going a little deeper into your home if we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there are many things I love about Waldorf education, and my children both attended a Waldorf school until it sadly closed a couple of years ago, the same year that my father died. Actually, it was a year of lots of endings and death in various forms. But I would say, particularly of my son, who he's doing kind of in the public level examinations, it's A levels here, so that's kind of when you leave school, and he's doing maths and physics and further maths, so he's very kind of science oriented. And whilst in a Waldorf school, every single child in every single year is part of a play or a performance. They sing every day. They, connect with musical instruments. They sew, they knit, they crochet, they bake, they forge copper in fires, they make kilns. That, it's a very actively creative experience, and you don't have any choice, and it's very much an integrated part of the curriculum. And so for my son in particular, who would have naturally streamed in a more scientific direction, he had the opportunity, I remember he had a small part as a butler in The Sound of Music. And he melted my heart because he came on the stage with a tuxedo and he was so cute. Oh. And he was just so charming, and he of himself would never have done that. He liked doing the lighting and being behind the scenes, and again, not like his mother, not really so happy being in front of cameras. But he was just so, it kind of, you could experience this like uprightness and this individuality in him. And I think that's one of the great gifts of Waldorf education, that it really allows, a child or a young person's unique individuality to blossom. And it does that in part by giving them many opportunities over however many years they are in school to access and awaken and experience that creative essence within each one. Because when you come into contact with something creative, you've got to kind of work something out, experience, experiment, reflect. It's a very internal process. And I think that the opportunity to kind of engage from the inside with something like consistently, so that it's very natural, is very strengthening for children. Even when they're kind of, when they were 6 and 7, they do like a class play at the end of the school year. But, when they're very little, they're in the round. So they all say all the parts all together. So it's very kind of inclusive and very community minded and just very nourishing. So children kind of develop this confidence in their own innate being. and who they are. And I think that that's what we all want for our children, isn't it? That they grow up kind of confident and resilient and strong, and like knowing who they are on the inside. And I think that's one of the, sounding like a Waldorf advert, but I love Waldorf education so much that I really think that, that's one of the many gifts I think that Waldorf education really does bring children, is that opportunity to experience and strengthen and access and awaken our natural creative kind of essence, if you like.
Yeah, and curiosity too. I love how, I mean, you even said that they would make a kiln. It's not just about make something and use this kiln. If you I understand that when they're learning about computers, they actually start by making a motherboard and like creating the things that then they use, so they can understand what went into the making of it, for them like a expression of it to evolve and their understanding. So it's really really amazing and fascinating. And now talk to me about storytelling and the role of storytelling, how because I know that's part of the program that we'll be talking about in a minute, but how have you brought storytelling into being a mother? Has there been a lot of storytelling time with your children? Now my daughters are 19, 18, and my son is 11, and he's my son's very much into storytelling. My younger daughter, I think will be a storyteller, like professionally somehow. She's studying to become a teacher, actually.
Wow.
And I'm hoping to show her your workshop with her, but she's in school, so she's rather busy, doesn't really have time to even message me much anymore, which is great. She's doing well, but I'm wondering about the role of storytelling in your life, and if you could speak a little bit about creativity in storytelling.
Well, again, I think most of my kind of experiences with my children have really come from Waldorf communities, because that's where we've been so immersed. And again, in Waldorf classrooms, storytelling is a really integral part of everyday kind of learning. So a teacher will share a story, and through that story, the learning happens. So, everything starts with the story, and that's a kind of an entry point, if you like, for children to be able to recall, what happened in the story, or to act it out, or to create their own stories, or to draw the stories, or all the many different ways that you can kind of relate to a topic. And so for me, I mean, as a mother, like I think, oh, I'm not a storyteller. What, how can I tell my children's stories? But in a way, what I learned from Waldorf schools is that you can just do it. There's so many kind of easy ways to share stories with children. And so I would often, from the things I'd learned at school, I would share stories with my children that would kind of, I'd be literally making them up on the spot, and they would have their own life. And I remember I had this story called, it was about a little boy called Ribak. And I told my son the story about this boy called Ribak, who happened to go through lots of adventures. And he did lots of things that my son did, or, it was like me subtly kind of moving him in certain directions if I wanted, like when we were traveling, then Ribak would go off on traveling adventures a little ahead of time as a kind of preparatory entry point into the travel. And my son, only when he was about, I don't know if he was like 13 or something, he suddenly went, Ribak is Kabir backwards. It was his name, of course. And it was just,
oh, Priya, you just gave me goosebumps.
I know, it was just, I mean, I thought, wow, I was like not good at
kind of keeping that on purpose, though?
oh yeah, of course.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, yeah. It was like a little secret, and I was just, and I have written these little stories. There's one, Ribak and the Rabbit, that I always keep meaning to actually do something with. It just sits in a drawer somewhere. But so, storytelling has been very much part of our kind of family life and growing up, and it's been really helpful. I mean, I was living in India when my son was born, and his father and I separated, and I used storytelling as a way to help navigate that transition. So I was telling him, already he was only young, he was like 3, about, a boy going on an adventure and traveling and meeting, new people in a new land, and it kind of, set the scene for the transition that was going to happen later in a more seamless way. So I think, storytelling can be quite profound. And yeah, I think, there are lots of kind of great ways of sharing about storytelling. I mean, I'm still wouldn't say that I'm a storyteller, but I just, I think it's so wonderful, isn't it? Like, some of my happiest memories of my children are, every night before they went to bed was just reading or sharing a story with them. And that's just those kind of precious moments. I mean, my teenagers are now 14 and 18 and barely say goodnight to me, before, I get a little good night, and then that's it. Nobody wants to hug anymore. And it's all very different than when they were little.
Yes. Or now we need to tell ourselves a story of what that means, right? We tell ourselves of what that means, like I do, Well, you have the School of Sophia, and how did that come into being? And when did you form that? And what do you do at the School of Sophia?
Yeah, so the School of Sophia is really quite new. It's a social enterprise, and I've worked in alternative education. I lived in Oroville in the south of India for 6.5 years, but this is already more than 14 years ago. And I've lived and worked in Steiner Waldorf communities here in the UK. And so for the last 20 years, I've kind of been in alternative education in various guises. And over the last 20 years, I mean, particularly living in Oroville, actually, because Oroville's a community based up, I don't know how many people there are now, but when I was living there were 2,500 people from 40 different countries. And it's a 50-year-old community. And because of the nature of it being an intentional community, it's quite a kind of wonderful place to visit. It attracted a lot of visitors, short-term visitors, long-term visitors, people just passing by. And because I was working in the local village schools there, and I was also part of the school board, the kind of local schools within the Oroville community, I got to meet some incredible educators and incredible teachers. And over the last 20 years, I've met so many amazing people and had so many incredible conversations. I thought, wouldn't it be nice to somehow share the wisdom of all those conversations and meetings with like wider groups of people? And here in the UK, there are a couple of state funded, so, paid for by the government, Waldorf schools, but literally only a couple. And mostly Waldorf education in the UK is, it's a private school, an independent school. So you really need somewhere between, and never mind just Waldorf schools, but private schools in general, you need between 10, 15, 20,000 pounds per child per year extra to be able to make that kind of choice. And I just feel like, I don't know, that education is for all children, and that all children should have the opportunity to flourish and thrive and benefit from tools and resources that genuinely help their well-being and, help them to grow up in a way that they can be contributors for the good of society. And I feel like, because I've had the privilege of meeting and coming into contact with so many different wisdom teachers and authors and people with brilliant ideas, I thought, what would it look like if I could find a way to share those resources freely and, at low cost with wider groups of people? So it's a bit of a long story, but so School of Sophia launched last year, really, with an event called Festival of the Child. And we had, I think I'd interviewed 24 different experts on different aspects of education. So there was psychologists and doctors and teachers and authors and lots of storytellers, actually, talking about, the courage of trauma, the courage of healing with a history of trauma for parents, and, the challenges of digital media and therapeutic storytelling, and so many different, the importance of play in the early years, so many different things. And it was broadcast for free over 7 days. And, we had 1,500 people join us over, however many, I don't know how many countries it was quite a lot. And it just felt like there was such a kind of clear mood and of parents and educators really passionate about, well, how are we raising children anyway? And what is the point of education, and what really helps and what doesn't help? Particularly as, increasing, I know I've said this a lot, but increasing numbers of children suffering from mental health issues. All the statistics are really alarming. Suicide is on the increase, depression and anxiety are, particularly high in teenage girls. I think 1 in 4 14-year-olds has suffered from some form of depression or anxiety. And what they cite is cyberbullying and exam pressure in particular. That's from a study that was done in the UK with over 10,000 young people. And so I think there, and you know, this is all even pre-pandemic. So of course the pandemic has exacerbated, you know, an already kind of tense situation. So really, kind of School of Sophia is trying to be a bit of a hub or a meeting place to really support parents and educators with resources that can help us connect more deeply to who we are as human beings, and also each other and the planet. Because, you know, I personally think that the education system is completely broken. You know, it's become completely standardized and centralized, and you know, we're kind of operating out of a performance framework that really doesn't live in this century anymore. And so, yeah, so what, you know, one of our intentions is to just share resources and build community, actually, globally. And that was one of the amazing things about World Unity Week, is because, again, you know, it's a global kind of space, and so many people from all over the world coming together and just talking about the things that they're really concerned about and upset about and worried about. And of course, as you start listening to people from different countries, it's pretty much all the same thing. And you know, I think that, you know, if we're going to kind of face the challenges that are clearly in front of us, that we can't operate out of the little silos that we've been living in. And it feels like really it's time to kind of come together with, you know, family around the world and see what might be possible. So that's really kind of the impulse behind the School of Sophia. It's a new enterprise, so it's, you know, it's evolving all the time, and it is a creative process. So, you know, I also, you know, it could orient in different directions, but you know, so far we've had obviously their festival. We've had, saying hello, we've had the Festival of the Child interview series, and then, you know, we've had different kind of group discussions with different doctors and psychologists and teachers, and it's just been really wonderful and very nourishing, listening and connecting with people globally.
Mookie's being naughty. He said he wouldn't, but he couldn't help himself.
Oh. Clearly wants to say hello.
Either he heard a leaf or he heard somebody walk by the front of the house, you know. So he gets very protective, especially when I'm the only one here. So many things that you said. You know, as we're in the pandemic right now, as we're going through this, we've seen so many teachers reinvent teaching for their students, and it's extraordinary, really astonishing what teachers have done to meet their students in a virtual space and to reinvent how they're using resources, how they've networked, and it really, the pandemic's given us an opportunity to reinvent so many different things and really level different things. And so I think it's extraordinary that you timed your launch last year, of how that came to be last year, and how you're now in this situation, and how you're planning this amazing online gathering next month, in a couple of weeks. Remember, it's November 5th through the 8th. And I'm excited to talk about it. The Tell Me a Story, Reimagining Education Through Storytelling, Creativity, and the Art of the Imagination. That is just, sounds so needed and so beautiful. And just talking with you now, I can see who you are and how all of these pieces weave together to this creation. And the fact that you were saying all these different people that you know, and I know you've gathered a lot of renowned presenters for this group gathering, and would love to know more. And also who can come to this. You know, you and I've talked about this before, and as a mother and as a creativity activist, I'm leaning right in and want to come to the program. And then educators as well. And I know there is a strong flavor of education, but if you could kind of cast an invitation to people who, you know, who this would resonate, you know, that this is for you, if kind of thing. And I'm going to mute because Mookie hasn't finished. He wants to have the microphone, and I'm not going to let him.
So, well, I mean, it's funny because yesterday I was at an online meeting, and it was the final conference of something called TIL, which is Teachers Inspiring Lifelong Learning. And it's basically has an aim to inspire kind of teachers' competencies in the future. And it's all about developing a lifelong learning European qualification for teachers as a foundation for helping children prepare for the future. And what really struck me as I was listening to all the speakers is that in order to foster a lifelong love of learning in children, we have to, as adults, like cultivate and model that lifelong learning capacity in ourselves. And of course, this is a program that, you know, it's got funded by the European Commission, and it's at the end of its kind of research cycle. So it's a 3-year project. And what they've done is they've developed this kind of self-assessment tool for teachers to understand what it means to be a lifelong learner. And, you know, they have set out some core competencies, like things, a new word I learned yesterday, metacognition, which, if I've understood it correctly, it's, you know, reflecting on the learning process itself. And so, yeah, so I'm just thinking about, you know, if I was talking about the pottery example earlier, it would be, you know, knowing that there's certain things that I could do and couldn't do, like I couldn't do the coasters or the vases because I didn't have that capacity, and being aware of the different dynamics that were coming up for me and being able to reflect on them and then kind of regulate myself whilst in that process. And the reason I'm sort of sharing this is because I think that at the heart of the Tell Me a Story event is to really cultivate a learning environment for all the participants. So, you know, it's an invitation, you know, that has been addressed at teachers and parents, but actually it could really be for anybody who wants to connect more to their own kind of creative essence and also feel the support and connection that you can experience by being in a field of others with shared values. Because at the heart of the event are kind of 3 pillars, and one is creativity, the next is connection, and the third one is community. And so kind of it's really about, you know, awakening each individual's creative agency so that an individual can have a felt experience of what it means to be a creative human being, and also, you know, to then experience what it's like to, you know, to receive and benefit from supportive connections with other people in community, and to use the kind of fuel of one's own self-awareness and one's own inner kind of creative connections to take the next best step in your own life and community. So, you know, for some people that might be, you know, I get so filled up on the inside by being part of this kind of experience of a global community of, you know, people who are passionate about education and the future, that I want to set up a homeschooling group, or I want to take an art class, or I'm going to commit to going for a walk in nature every week, or I'm going to, you know, start telling stories to my 6-year-old, or, you know, I mean, it could look like lots of different things. So although it is aimed at parents and educators, I feel like it does have a kind of quite a broad appeal. And really the kind of impulse behind it is to support adults as learners, you know, as lifelong learners, and for adults to feel kind of more empowered. Because I think we sort of touched on it a bit earlier, hadn't we, that, you know, most of us, if we think back to our childhoods, we received messages from teachers and parents that, you know, some were positive, some were not. And the things that, you know, some of those more negative messagings that we might have received, they really impact how we parent and educate and raise children. So in a way, Tell Me a Story is also about the stories we tell ourselves about who we are as adults and human beings, and how we show up, and how some of those stories impact our own ability to teach children, or, you know, be engaged in that learning process, or parent. And so, you know, at one level, it's like an opportunity for people to come into contact with their own their own kind of historical story, if you like, and then not more importantly, as importantly, to create a new story. Because of course, you know, as you've shared, you know, in this pandemic time, teachers have had to think on their feet and do things differently. Parents have had to become teachers overnight, and it's it is fraught with a lot of challenges and difficulty for a lot of people. And I think that, you know, I don't think that nobody really knows what's the next step. You know, how long is the pandemic going to last? What does education look like in the future? And in a way, this is an opportunity to kind of do a kind of system reset, you know, like the thing you do on your computer when it stops working. And
Reboot, reboot.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it feels like, you know, the creative solutions, like the creative process, it's an unknown thing, and it's almost like we have to enter into that process together as a group of people with, you know, sharing similar values, and see what then is living in the collective field and wants to emerge. So in the coming together, you know, I feel like the answers, if that's the right way to put it, will emerge from the group itself. So, you know, and that could look, you know, different for different people. And I just think that, you know, creativity in itself, it stimulates kind of problem solving and innovation and new ways of looking at things. And God only knows we need some new ways of looking at things right now.
Empowering our own relationship with not only creativity but the story that we're telling, something that you said about what we're telling ourselves, you know, and that is, it's so powerful. And the invitation for your offering coming up is so beautiful and so relevant and timely and needed, and it just aligns so much with what Joyfuel represents. I was so excited that we were able to talk today. Should I share the wonderful video that shares more information?
Yeah,
all right, so I'm going to share my screen and we all watch this video together, and then we'll come back.
Looking around the globe, you'd be forgiven for thinking we're living in a world gone half mad. The global pandemic, raging forest fires, and police brutality highlighting systemic racism going back 400 years. Masked populations of people who are fearful, anxious, and under curfew. As our climate collapses around us, how many more species must die before we wake up to the fundamental truth that we are each connected, you, me, and the planet? We need each other to thrive. But what about the legacy we're leaving our children and grandchildren? What story are we telling them about what it means to be a human being? Increasing numbers of our children are facing mental health issues. The global pandemic and lockdown has exacerbated the challenges of an already broken system. We've inherited an outdated education system based on old paradigm thinking. We focused on telling children what to think instead of how to think. As our schools begin to open globally, we are in a moment of transition. We have a window where we can truly place the developmental needs of our children first. But what are the capacities we need as parents and educators to meet the evolutionary edge of these times and shift the learning paradigm into one that actually mobilizes real change? My name is Priya Mahtani, and I'm the founder of the School of Sophia and the creator and organizer of Tell Me a Story. Together, we can inspire an education revolution worthy of the more beautiful world our hearts long to inhabit. Just like the late Sir Ken Robinson, we believe not just in a creative education for our children, but that we must champion the forces of creativity to mobilize societal and cultural change.
Every human being is creative. We are creative all the time. We don't know it, we forget it, but in everything we do, in our language, our words, the clothes we wear, the gestures we make, and I think that is a constant part of human life that we are unconscious of. And the point that we're working is to make it conscious, aware, and especially in the classroom.
If you want to be a part of this change, to leave a legacy worthy of future generations, if you are longing to feel more whole and vibrant in your own life, if you are craving deeper connections with others, we're inviting you to our online event, Tell Me a Story, as we reimagine education through storytelling, creativity, and the art of the imagination.
Have we designed our schools, both our school for our very little children as they grow older, the secondary schools? Have we designed our universities to care for all living things?
In the Lakota way of prayer, which has by now become almost a global saying, Mani Wachoni, they said, that has a lot of meaning, but a kind of shorthand is to say that water is life. Not only is water life, but water is also alive.
We want to empower you to take the next best steps in your own life and community so that you feel better resourced and strengthened through your connections with others as we work together for the good of people and planet.
If I could capture love's most secret potion, of Cupid's arrows dipped in devotion, I would compose the sweetest poem and I would give it all to you. If I could enlist words oh so profound, an exquisite mixture of precious sound to paint the picture of a foolish clown.
Over 3.5 days, we will take an immersive experiential journey together with brilliant speakers, enchanting storytellers, and artistic activities to awaken your creative essence as you step into a greater version of yourself than you'd previously thought possible. Come join the education revolution and let's figure this out together. If you'd like to join us, just click on the button below and I'll see you in your inbox very soon.
schoolofsophia.org. Oh, so beautiful. Oh, you really captured the essence of the problems and the solutions in that beautiful video. And I love your broadcast announcer voice as well. You sound like you do that all the time.
Oh my goodness, it was, I mean, that was, I have to say, totally out of my comfort zone, a real stretch and very challenging. I mean, that whole video turned around in, I think, 5 days from idea to script to, and only ever it's my second ever video. So it was quite a process. And, you know, I guess that's the thing about the creative process. You know, I feel like, you know, I'm also learning and growing all the time and learning from real life. Christopher Clowder, who was in the video, who's also one of our speakers, he was in the conference I attended yesterday, and he said that lifelong learning depends on our capacity to learn from life. And it just really struck me that, you know, he also said that we have to enlarge our capacities of imagination and expand what it means to be a human being. And you know, I mean, every single word he ever shares is utterly profound. So I'm so grateful that he's a speaker at the event, and you just have to be careful not to speak after him. You know, it's speak beforehand.
He's a closing speaker, Priya, is he?
He's an opening speaker. But I mean, it's just, I think it's just that thing about bringing people together and, you know, reimagining what can be possible. And it feels like, although we are living in this intense, challenging time, there's so much opportunity to weave and paint and vision a better kind of future that we really do want to live, and a world that, you know, as I keep finding myself saying, that our hearts long to inhabit, and a world that we can gift the next 7 generations and like leave a really worthy legacy of our children and grandchildren. And, you know, I mean, every parent just wants their child to be happy, and I think that we kind of owe it to ourselves as human beings to, you know, to come together and find ways in which we can empower future generations with the resources, skills, capacities that they need, so that they can navigate what's certainly, you know, ahead.
We'll talk a little bit about the format of what you're offering, and I know it's a global event, but I remember you said to me that it's available to experience. Some of it is live, some of it is recorded, but then there will be recordings for people who attend. So regardless of where you're tuning in from, it's going to be available to you outside of when it's actually happening, if the time doesn't match up. So I'm going to share the slide with the dates and with some beautiful bullet points as you talk a little bit about the format for the 3.5 days.
Sure. So it's 3.5 days, and there's an opening ceremony on Thursday, the 5th of November, with Pat McCabe and Matt McCartney. We're very blessed to have both of them. And so the format is pretty much the same over the 3 days, which is that we'll have speakers every day, and then there will be immersive kind of storytelling sessions. So, there'll be an opportunity to really experience the power of storytelling, and then also, space afterwards to discuss what was happening in those sessions and to kind of unpick those sessions a little bit. But also really woven into the program, which really feels really important, are lots of group discussions and breakout sessions. So we're kind of like a little bit aiming in between a conference and a retreat. So the idea is to share, obviously brilliant speakers and to inspire, participants, but also to really awaken what is living and true for each participant. What are the kind of challenges you're facing in your community, and how can, accessing your own creativity offer you kind of solutions or fuel through which you can then take the next step in your own life. And so, woven throughout the program are very kind of deliberate spaces where people can engage in kind of group discussions and chats. And of course, the thing about, obviously it's wonderful to be online and reach a global community. And the thing about time zones, I mean, I'm time zone dyslexic, as everybody knows, so I trip up over time zones all the time. But so we're starting at 2:00 UK time, which makes it, accessible if you're on the East Coast in the States, and a bit early if you're on the West Coast. It's a 9:00 start on the East Coast, and I think a 6 a.m. start on the West Coast. And as you said, all the sessions will be recorded, but the recordings will be shared not immediately, just a little, probably in a week or so after the event, because it will take a bit of time to put them all together. So people will have access to the recordings afterwards, so they can certainly catch up. But I really, would invite anybody who's thinking about joining us to, really consider committing to the live sessions, because I think that's where the most kind of benefit also will be for people wanting to participate. Because the idea is to really experience the power of those connections with others also, for, everybody's kind of individual journey too.
Thank you so much. And the website, I think I put it in the Facebook link, but it is schoolofsophia.org/tell-me-a-story. Is that right?
That's absolutely
right.
it.
So, you can get more information. And I know you're inviting financial gifts to attend, and wanted to just give you an opportunity to talk about what the gift level is, and if you have, people who are students or anything, what's the invitation there?
Sure. So I don't know what the price is in dollars. I'm conscious that maybe it would be helpful. But so the price for a full 3.5 day ticket is £147, and £77 if you're a concession. And, if you're experiencing financial hardship for any reason, then, you can just access that directly on the website. And if you're under 28 and or a student, you can just email me and get in touch, because we have, different pricing for students and under 28s, because we really want to encourage young people in particular also to be part of the process. And just for the next week, we've got this, I have to say, I mean, it's like bring a friend for free. Whilst I was growing up, my dad he loved the kind of buy 3, buy 2, get 1 free, buy 1, get 1 free, all those kind of offers in supermarkets. So I've kind of been brought up with my dad kind of I can just see him grinning at offers. So of course now, whenever I see an offer anyway, I really remember him. And I just thought that it kind of felt fitting, kind of in the spirit of remembering my dad also, to just encourage people, you know, because we want it to be a kind of community experience. So if somebody we're saying if you buy a ticket before next Wednesday, the 28th of October, that you can bring a friend for free.
Wonderful.
So
That's
that,
wonderful.
you know, that's just trying to encourage people also to have that experience in community with others, so that they can, you know, perhaps take the materials forwards in their own community afterwards also.
That is so beautiful. Well, I'm really struck by what you're saying about creating spaces for community, and as evidenced with World Unity Week and also the Upconvergence, coming to know each other. I recently saw The Social Dilemma, that documentary about, ironically, Facebook, because we're on Facebook. And I've been contemplating the difference between feeling used by Facebook and using Facebook, and realize that even meeting you and meeting so many change makers in the world, the connections and the positive experiences that I have using Facebook media and social media in general is because of the actions that I outright take, and I step forward and I say, yes, and I can do this, and this is how I can use this and how I can do this, instead of feeling used by it. And so I think what you're inviting people to have an experience with content, and then people meeting people and sharing each other's contact info and having deep conversations and collaboration, the opportunity, it's just so meaningful right now, and such a beautiful possibility for us to step in and have those conversations and meet people. And would you like to share your email address as well, in case people want to have questions? And
well, just to speak to that last point that you just shared, is that in fact all the, you know, because we've run lots of kind of 3 and 4 week programs since April actually of this year, particularly to support parents and educators during the pandemic. And pretty consistently, the thing people have said, you know, above and beyond content, is, wow, I really loved meeting that person. And relationships and connections have continued afterwards, and people have really valued listening to different perspectives from different parts of the globe that is still somehow the same. And so I think that, you know, that's really, it feels like that this is that time where we have to really come together and lean into ways of supporting each other in order to move forwards. So my email is Priya, Priya, at schoolofsophia.org.
wonderful. I'll go back out to the Facebook page and add that after we have finished, and see if there are any questions. We had some feedback that Pam loves your goddess statue.
Oh, thank you, Pam.
And
I have literally a little table in my house with about 40 of them now, because I went on a bit of a kind of goddess statue
making
obsession.
Let's see, we've got lots of different people watching, and lots of feedback about the program, and you have a natural radio voice.
That's lovely to hear. Thank you.
Jules, thank you, Jules, for saying that. She certainly has. And how about, this is a good question. Well, first of all, confirming your website URL is schoolofsophia.org. Yes, it is. And is the content suitable for youth to attend? And for in case of homeschooling families who want to participate as a unit. So if there was a family that was interested.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I would say that it is aimed at adults mostly. So you know, young people are welcome to attend, but I would suggest that really over the age of 16, because it's really aimed at seeing how we can support young people. And I think, I would say 16 plus would be.
Okay. Brilliant. That answers that question. And thank you all for watching online. We're really grateful that you're there, and for these questions. I'm see if there are any others. I'm not checking every page that we're on, but this is just on our main page on the Joyfuel Way Facebook page. So Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share, or any other thoughts that you have in closing?
I just want to say thank you so much to you, because I really appreciate the opportunity to speak and share about the things that make my heart sing. And, you know, as I've shared with you before, I'm kind of new to Facebook Live. So I, you know, was certainly feeling a bit anxious and nervous beforehand, but I really appreciate, you know, how full of warmth and joyful and joy fueled you are, literally, in creating such a beautiful space. So I really, you know, very grateful to you for holding this space for me and supporting me, and, you know, all the joy that you bring, because it really is so needed in the world.
It is my joy just being able to amplify what you do as a creativity activist, and all of these different aspects that you bring that animate in the world that is so needed. And it's just so beautiful. I'm so grateful for our friendship and to know of your work, and wish you so many blessings on the collective that's
so
happening November 5th through the 8th global event. We'll update some more links in the Facebook stream so that people can check those things out. And thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everybody for watching
Thank you, everybody
the
who was
Joyfuel
listening.
Kindcast.